Hi everyone, welcome to PasigoDesign Watercolor Studio, and we're back today to finish this last little painting of basically skies and clouds within a landscape setting that I've done. These I've done in 3 previous episodes, so you can check that out if you're looking to see how I did those. But for today we're going to do the final one here. And again, this is a study. For me, it's not a big finished final painting. It's just experimenting to see how our colors can work within those boundaries, and in some loose watercolor mixes to see what kind of skies that we can create and what kind of effects that would be interesting to maybe build out on a larger painting. It's always a great idea to experiment first before you launch into a full sheet of arches and decide to paint a landscape. Planning your design in advance is a good idea. And in my case, all I've done is, you won't see that on the video, but all I have here, and I'll just show you with a dry brush, I have a line. I've decided where the ground and the skies meet. Okay. So that's an important line to draw when you're doing a little landscape like this, because it'll tell me how far down I need to go to do the cloud stuff, and then what else I can put in the foreground to make it look like land. All right, so with this in mind, and although I have a horizon line, it's just very vaguely marked, and I've also extended a line down to here. So I've gone and done horizontal and then diagonally going down to make stuff like this, right? This is how I bring that into, I bring the eye into the background by doing these lines at the end. And I did draw one, just a light one here to show a little bit of a stream. All right, so let's get started. And like the last time, I will basically just add water on the background. This, remember I said there's a horizon line here. So that line, ground line to sky, it's there, and I will also wet it, because it doesn't matter if I get some of that sky color in there. I can change that. As you know, I've done that in the previous videos. So right up to here, it's wet. And now I'll just start mingling the colors. I want, thinking I'd like to have something a little darker this time, but notice that I've mixed my 3 primary colors already, the same ones: Nicolazo yellow, Quin red, and Prussian blue. And I've also made little mixes. This is just it's just adding water to the yellow and making it a liquidy base that I can easily mix with the other colors. So these are all kind of at the same strength, and these are pure pigments. If I want something thicker, then I go to the pure pigments. If I want something really soft and smooth, I go to the area that is already mixed with water. So let me show you the strength of these. So you see this yellow is pretty strong. That's going to be quite effective. And this also is pretty strong. But when they dry lighter, and we know that. So let's try this one also. And again, the blue is strong, but when it dries, it's going to be like a medium light to light value. These are not super thick compared to, for example, if I took a little bit of this blue over here. Very different. I don't want this to start. I want this to start. Okay. So I'll just mix that up in here. Okay, so this is wet, and I usually, if I'm going to put a couple of colors in here, I don't want to put the yellows and the blues together, like I've said before, because then you get green. So if I want yellow, I would probably use the red to mix with it, which is what I did here. But in this case, I want to have a grayer sky. So I'd like to add some red Adding a little bit more water to this red. I feel like this has already started to dry a bit more than what I would like, so I'm talking too much. Just add a bit more water here. Don't want it to be sopping wet. And I want to be able to do lines, so I'm going to go in here and start doing some bold strokes with red. And you can see that it moves. It's really nice at this point because everything is going to be very loose. I'll take some of the yellows and I'll bring them down over here. Just to soften that line over here. And I'm also going to grab now some of the blues. So this is going to be a very bold sky, very bold. If I bring the blue into the yellow, it won't give me what I want. So I'll stay away from that as much as I can, and maybe even add a bit more red here. So as soon as I add more of that red, you see, as it mingles with some of the yellow on my paper, I'm starting to get the grays, which is sort of what I want in here. Sort of in a sense that I still have some nice bright color. So it's going to be a mixture. Let's take some blue and maybe add another little brush here. Let's add some red to this mix. You'll see what I mean now. I've got the purple. So that purple can now go in here. My paper is very wet now, probably because I wet it twice because I was talking too much. So I'll just lift a little bit of that color here with a paper towel, just fine. And like I said earlier, I wanted to get some darkness in here. And we might still be able to add more color, but I'm going to stop here because if I do too much, I may not have that nice blending anymore. I do kind of like the way it's going, and maybe just add a little bit more blue in here. Okay. The foreground is going to, I'm going to have like a little bit of blue starting up over here with a kind of like a spread of water. So I'm just using my brush and making some strokes along the edges of the paper here and down to the horizon line, and just very close to that point where I'm touching it a little bit, but not completely, because I don't want the two to mingle completely. And on the other side of this, I'm going to wet it. And I'm still staying away from the horizon line. I'd still like to keep that fairly clean. So at this point, there's so many colors in that sky. Wow. Now I can go for green. Let's just go crazy. All right. And then we'll come back and we'll touch that up once it's dried. We'll see what that looks like. Once it settles, the colors will change, and then we can adjust accordingly. This is a very, I guess, early stage in a painting where we do stuff like this, but this is how we let everything blend together for a nice effect. And then afterwards we can go in and add details, like something a little bit more dramatic, more of a focal point perhaps in front of. Now, one thing that I might still be able to do here, I'll grab some of that blue, and I'm still trying to keep my paints fairly pure here. Okay. Very deep blue here, which would resemble what I have up here in the sky. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of that in here. While it's still wet, because then that really looks nice when it mingles. You can do it at the end too, like these dry marks, dry brush marks here are done afterwards. But this is the stuff that creates these sort of soft effects, really very nice and gentle. Okay, I think I'll leave it about here and we'll come back. Okay, this is dried. Let's take a look at what else we can do on here. First of all, the sky dried to a pretty interesting color combination. And although I never add more color typically to a sky that I've already completed, just because unless you're doing hard shapes, I'm going to do that this time because I want this to be maybe a little bit darker. This was my goal for this painting, was to have that sky a bit more like a stormy sky. So I'm just adding more water, and I'll take some of the blue that I have, a little bit of the reds, and I'll add just a touch of that yellow here. Don't want to contaminate my yellow yet. Let's see what's on here. Now, this is basically just a glaze. We're not adding a lot of pigment. We're adding a mixture of colors. Now, if I wanted to glaze with one color, that would also be, let's try that. I was going to glaze with a gray, but let's just do it first with one color at a time. I need to take my blue. It'll be a lot fresher, and I don't need to do it everywhere. Let's just soften some of those edges, because I don't want it. I do like that nice color here, and I do want the trees to have a little bit more impact. So let's just see if we can bring some of that in here without changing those colors. And once that dries, I could even add some more reds. But what's happening by glazing with one color is you're going to see the colors underneath. So probably a better approach than mixing it for this kind of thing than mixing it on the board to get the grays. Now, what I've done here is I had a little outline for, I don't know, just a little water's edge. And I think what I'd like to do at this point is take, now I'm going to mix on my palette a little bit of the red. Still trying to keep my pigments reasonably clean. Okay, that's more like, and some of the yellows. Now let's take a look at what we have here. Now I'm mixing a color. I don't feel like I have enough of that yellow. I'm getting a lot of blue. That's that greeny mixture that I had, right? And what I'm not liking about this so much is the fact that I've already said I should be bringing some of the sky color into the foreground. And so by doing this, I'm going back down that same rabbit hole, right? I've sort of broken my rule based on what I said for the other paintings. So here we go. Let's not do that and think about instead how we could incorporate this into this. Okay, so blues, right? Simple. And here. Blues. Some reds. Maybe bringing that out some more. Just trying to create a little bit of a ragged sort of shoreline without losing everything over there. So this is such a small space. We're doing things that if we had more paper to play with, maybe we could add a little bit more detail, but this is as much as I want to do for this one. Okay, this is still wet, and like I've done before, when things are still wet, I do like to, let's see here, take my calligraphy brush. I do like to use some pure pigment, like the blue that I have here. A little bit of water that I had. Now I'm just going to mix this very strongly, so I'm not adding a lot of water. I want this to be that nice gray now that I want to put in here. So it's very dark, very blackish. There we go. And a little bit of water in here. Let's take a look at that. Okay. Now in here, I thought it was still wet. Still somewhat damp, but what I'll do is just put a little bit of water at the bottom here. And what we're going to be painting is some dark shapes in the distance. Little treetops of some sort. Don't have to do it everywhere, just adding a little bit of a scattered outline. Okay, now I have still some green in here, but the green is actually up here. And a lot of purples here. It's still wet. We can try to add a little bit of color here. That's fine. It's still wet, but I'm not using a lot of water on here, so I can actually take advantage of that wetness and have the colors flow into. And what this is doing, it's also creating the shadow of the shapes that are defining this little river edge. And the shadow is on this side of these shapes because it's shining down like this. And then, of course, the water, although we don't have much there, we could actually add a little bit of, just a little bit of color in here. I'm not putting a lot, just a hint of some yellows. And again, we have to be careful because there's blue under here, so that'll turn gray. And we're trying to stay away from gray. Or I'm sorry, just green. Trying to stay away from the greens in certain areas like skies. And so I'll add more of the red. And right here, maybe this is a little bit bigger, like a bigger rock, right? Maybe it's kind of like going up into the edge. Okay. So for our painting, our little painting study of what we could do in a larger painting, I think it's as successful as we want it to be at this point, because it's taught us a couple of things. How to create those darks in the sky using these colors. I've also decided that I didn't like that green here, and I should have used more of the sky color in here. That's lesson learned, right, for the next one. And also, one of the things that I've learned is that the ragged edges over here, I mean, they're great, but make sure you have a good idea of where you're going with it before you start. I've had to correct my ragged edge a couple of times because I didn't like it. So if I had done a sketch before, I might have had a better feel for where my shoreline was going. And I think that's really important, one of the really big ones. If you sketch beforehand, you've got the material in your head to be able to create. If you don't, then, which is what I was doing here, I'm basically sketching on this piece of paper, watercolor paper, and painting the sketch. Basically, this is my information now for a future painting. And so give that a try and think about that. And if you didn't like the success, if it wasn't successful, you haven't wasted anything. You haven't wasted a lot of time. You haven't wasted a lot of paper or paint or anything. You've really just been able to say, okay, I'll do another one and I'll try that instead. Okay. So give that a try, and let's call that a day for skies and clouds. Thanks for watching.